It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Breakfield and Burkey. Hello, guys. How are you?
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much, Douglas. How are you?
We're great. Happy to be here.
I'm doing fine, thank you. Nice to have you both here. So you guys are a writing team, and it looks like you've got a whole series of books called the Enigma series. Is that correct?
That's correct. So, we got 12 books in the series, and one novella, sort of as a prequel that we released earlier this year.
Okay, and I'm trying to give me an idea of your writing process, because as a team writing, I don't understand quite how to do that. I've always been a solo writer, primarily a songwriter, but I've never had much luck working with people, except for one guy that I worked with way back in the 1980s. He was the only guy I could write songs with. Other than that, I had to do the whole thing myself. So how do you do it? How do you divide up the work, or what is the process with you guys?
That is a great question, Douglas. So we are technology professionals, and so everything we do, we keep it in a digital kind of format, including how we structure and map out the stories in the series. So we keep everything on a spreadsheet, from the characters to the chapters, to who is responsible for each chapter, at least for the initial write.
Now, we use our, once that's established, then we use our patent-pending technique called literary badminton. And that gives us the ability to be able to take a chapter, chew on it, polish it up, ship it over to the other person, and back and forth until we get it to its the characterization, the story, the whole flavor, so it reads like there's only one person.
Okay,
kind of a single voice perspective. So that way people can't really tell. They can guess, but they really can't tell who wrote what chapter.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, my next question, because I've seen other book series that there have been like 5 and 6 writers on the cover and contributing to it. And I couldn't never figure out how in the world people would have the sort of continuity in the book, because everybody has their own writing styles. And some people have very pronounced writing styles, like Stephen King, for example. I mean, there's no question when he writes something who wrote it, because his style is so unique. So how do you kind of keep it blended so that it's not quite as pronounced, like, oh, Charles wrote this bit, Rox wrote that bit?
Yeah, we've actually had the editor approach us a couple times and say, who wrote this one? And our response is always yes. That's what we want. We don't want somebody to be able to see that this was done by Charles, that was done by Rox. That's an annoying attribute for any reader. So we spend that extra time polishing so you can't tell when we change writers.
All right. Well,
one thing, Douglas, that we find is when we're doing dialogue for different characters. So, our characters are both men and women, or, male and female, however you want to address it. And we will approach each other and say, there's not a woman in the world that would say that the way you said it, and vice versa. So that way we kind of get the benefit of really knowing the voices of the characters.
Yeah. That's important when we're building dialogue, and like, okay, this is the way I would say it as a male, and and then how would you interpret it as a female if we have those kind of characters. So it's a polishing effort to be able to get the right flavor for the character at that point in time.
Well, what's the benefit of working like this rather than just, okay, Charles, you do the first book, and then Rox, you do the second book, and why is the collaboration a benefit for you?
Well, it's twofold from our perspective. We both have full-time jobs, and they're in the technology field, so that the hours are demanding and the workload is demanding. But we also both like telling stories, and elements of the stories in our fictional thrillers are technology elements. So when we have both of us writing, we can verify and validate different elements of the story, and we can kind of fast-track stories to get them delivered out to our fans.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. How did you guys decide to start writing novels?
Well, we hit on the idea after we had done a couple of tech manuals that were, as soon as we had them published, they were out of date. So I got dissatisfied with that kind of scenario. So I stomped off, took my marbles, went home, and then a couple of weeks later, Roxanne shows up. He goes, okay, new deal. Let's make the technology, it's legitimate technology, and put it in the background, but let's make a story to be able to bring this information to light. And the storytelling attribute is really the beginning of the effort. So as we find interesting attack vectors in the technology world, I mean, malware, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, we take those and we explore them with the backdrop, as the backdrop. And they run with the characters and take the story, and sometimes the story tells us, I'm going here.
Okay. I'm looking at your press release that was sent to me, and the book on the promo is The Enigma Factor Book 1. But you said that there's 12
Right.
books. The 12 books are already out for this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Oh, so how long ago was Book 1 written?
So book 1 was originally written about 10 and a half years ago. But it was reissued as a second edition because we figured after writing so many books, we have learned how to craft a better story, and B, we wanted to modify some of the technology to be more relevant. So that one was released 3 years ago as a second edition.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, I got it. Yeah, you're right about technology, though, because, I mean, as soon as you finish the book, there's something new, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And see, our premise, Douglas, to be very candid with you, is that technology is today's weapon of choice.
Oh, well, I agree with that. It's sort of like nuclear power in the sense that you can use it for good or you can use it for evil. And the
Exactly.
Yeah, and the internet has sort of become that. It can be very dangerous if it's used in an improper or immoral way. And I think mankind, I think our brains haven't caught up with. In other words, the technology has gone so fast, has changed so quickly that we haven't been able to digest it yet. We're still kind of going, and I think it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen how, kids spending 7 and 8 hours a day on Facebook and TikTok, how that's going to affect them psychologically. I don't think we know yet. I think that there are just so many different facets of socialization that may be getting impaired by technology. I don't know, but it certainly appears that way to me. What do you think?
Well, we've explored this kind of theme in several different books. I mean, the first one was identity theft. Was one. The engineering, or with enough data, you can predict the future. So that we basically started exploring that in book number 5. We try to, where's the ethical boundaries is always in background mode for almost all the books, trying to be able to figure out, this is how we can do it. Will somebody please tell me if we should do it? And so those are some of the exploration questions that we like to keep floating around through all the books, making sure that people are questioning, is this right? Are we doing the right thing?
And the other thing we worry about is parents today tend to get their kids, here's your device, go have fun. They don't always put guardrails on it or time limits on it. And, kids kind of run amok. If here's some of the stories from Facebook or TikTok or any of the, 200 and some odd options for social media today. you can't always learn everything in 240 characters.
Well, that's a good point. I agree with that. So this book series is a fiction book series. How is it set up? Because I see you've got a character named Jacob. So just explain the sort of overall premise of the book, how it's set up.
So the premise of the book is these cyber good guys, which is a group of heroes called the R Group, of which Jacob Michaels is one of the key members. It's a family business that was passed down from the forefathers of the R Group, which escaped Coleman in 1939. Their goal in life is to help right things and fight the cyber thugs. So, at a very base level, it's the, white hats versus the black hats, or the good guys versus the bad guys. But when you deal with the cyber and digital capabilities today, it's very fast, and it can be very threatening in all different ways.
Okay, how is this different from The Matrix?
Well, in The Matrix, what you've got is an alternate reality that you can dive into, and it's you can retreat from it. There are no real boundaries in our books because this is all real life. This is the stuff we're seeing day in, day out. The cyber threats, the things that people concoct just because they can, and the business model that is showing up off of the dark net. Basically is run like a regular corporate business with one goal in mind: extort money from the people. How do you run from something like that? You unplug everything. That's not practical in today's society. So you could get out of the Matrix. You can't really get out of what we have today.
Oh, yeah, in one story, Douglas, we actually explored people trying to do criminal activity off the network or off the grid. And they still, at some point in time, had to dip back into the grid to be able to count their wealth and gather all of their insights and so forth. So today it is practically impossible once you've dipped your toe into the digital world to say, oh, I'm going to totally unplug. Nobody wants to give up their phone, their PC. They just don't want to do it.
Not being able to text the kids like, okay, I'm here to pick you up from school. Where are you guys located? Where are you standing? All of that, those conveniences, trying to forfeit that. That's like, I'm not sure exactly how you'd be able to do that. I know the Amish try and do some of that, but we're not part of that discipline.
But they've never been exposed to it necessarily either. So once you've gotten a taste of it, it's very hard to give up.
Yeah, well, with some people, it's like a heroin withdrawal to try to get the phone out of their hand for 10 minutes. It's unbelievable. The movie that this just reminded me of was The Mosquito Coast. Did you remember that one? It's an old one.
No, I don't remember that one. I do remember one. Have you ever seen the Colossus, the Forbin Project?
No, I haven't seen that one. Okay, we're batting zero with movies. The Mosquito Coast was basically, it was Harrison Ford in River Phoenix, and he was a family farmer in Iowa who just decided that he had enough, and he packed up his kids and family and moved to, he was an inventor, and he moves to the middle of the African Congo, and he has this brilliant idea that he's going to make a machine that makes ice and bring ice to the people in the middle of the African Congo who had never seen ice before. I know it sounds ridiculous, but there was a whole sort of story behind it of this idea of technology is going to help people without, and then it ends up not working at all, and it was a whole disaster. But it was a good movie. I think it won a couple of Academy Awards. Came out in the, I want to say the early 80s.
Mid-80s.
Yeah, the mid-80s. Okay. We're just about out of time, but I wanted to ask you if you've shopped this around for film rights, because it sounds like it could be, sort of Matrix-born, those kind of serial films that would go. Have you done any of that?
Boy, we just love hearing people with that observation. Let me just tell you, we're doing our happy dance here. It's like, all right, here he is. He believes us too. So, yes, we've got a screenplay that we built off of the prequel called Out of Poland, and that basically begins the R group, and it helps define their moral high ground, their ethics, and the thinking that goes into stealing the Germans' Enigma machine to be able to give it to the Allies. And how do you do that when your country's being sandwiched in between the Soviets and the Germans?
The Enigma.
So we did create a screenplay, and we registered it about a year ago.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, actually, thinking about it, because you've got so many, that this would probably make a better Netflix series than a film, right? You could sort of do 1 hour segments, and you'd have, if you did 1 hour per book.
So
yeah.
I'm on board with that. I just don't have the right contact. Douglas, can you help us out?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I've got all kinds of contacts, but whether or not they are interested in it is a whole other story. Because I just saw a very frightening statistic, speaking of technology and its effects on mankind. Amazon has released their report for 2021, 2.2 million self-published books on Amazon for 2021.
Wow.
It's staggering, right? Now, some of that,
stunning.
Yeah, some of that could have been uptick from COVID because people were locked in for 2 years. So they had nothing else to do, so they got around to that book they've been meaning to write and self-publish it. But the idea that there's 2.2 million self-published books out there, I had very mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, I was like, okay, well, great. But on the other hand, it was like, okay, so how do you find the good stuff? Because it's not all going to be great. And it begged the question, is it more important to write a good quality book or to have a stunning, stellar publicist? Which is more important, the content or the marketing at this point?
It's kind of like the 80-20 rule. Unfortunately, or fortunately as the case may be, 80% of the exposure is going to happen with a fantastic publicist. But you can't take advantage of a fantastic publicist unless you have good quality work, because they won't keep you.
Yeah, so if you're not turning out quality material that people are giving reviews for, you're not doing the due diligence, you're not doing the research. It's riddled with mistakes. That's a death sentence for any author.
I hope so. I really hope so.
What did you read lately that you thought was horrific?
Well, I don't want to name names, but there is some real garbage out there. And it's not only books, it's music, it's film, it's podcasts, it's anything that anybody can do DIY now, thanks to the technology. Before anyone could do a podcast, I'll just use that as an example because that's what I'm doing. People went to school for broadcasting, and this was an art form as much as it was a talent. To be able to speak well, to have a good voice, to have interesting questions to ask people. And now the bar has been set on the floor for podcasting because it's the lowest one. I mean, with writing books, I think people realize that you have to have some talent to write a book, and you need to hone your craft, and it takes time. Similarly with music, people don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to play the piano. It's not that easy. Filmmaking, you need a whole crew of people, you need equipment, you need cameras, you need money to be able to do anything decent. But with a podcast, all you need is like a microphone and a computer, and that's it. You turn it on, and if you can speak, you can make a podcast. It costs you essentially nothing. And people have taken on to this idea that the whole world wants to hear them speak. And it's not true. There are 3 million podcasts registered on Listen Notes. So there's more podcasts than there are books. And again, the same rules apply. Is having a great podcast more important, or having a great promoter, marketer, so that people know that you exist? And I don't know. I'm still baffled by that question myself.
So podcasters typically have a thumbs up, thumbs down, follow me kind of button, for lack of a better term, at the end of their show. If you like this, follow me, share me. So that's one way to say, yes, this is pretty good, or a thumbs down, you probably are either hitting the wrong market or it's garbage. But books are similar, Douglas. If people will take the time to write reviews when they're finished with a book and do a fair and honest rating, that helps to guide people on what's good work or not. What we find is people are lazy and tend to not want to take the 5 minutes it would take to do a review because it's not as easy as a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Well, that's true. Yeah, and there's no...
And so that's a little problematic, I think.
There's a friend of mine has started an organization called the American Podcast Association, and it's just getting off the ground. But what she plans to do with it is to make it like a seal of approval for podcasts, so that when people are podcast shopping, if they see that seal on there, they know at least the basics are covered, like your audio quality, and there'll be certain criteria that the podcast has to meet in order to get that approval seal from them. And I think that's a great start, because then people can look through and say, oh, okay, well, this one's got the seal. Let's check that out. And they know that it's not going to sound like somebody recorded it using 2 tin cans and a string, and it's going to have some kind of intelligent content. And so we'll see. We'll see how she does. I hope this thing works for her, because I think it's long overdue. Sorry, I didn't mean to digress into this whole podcast thing, but
no, that's good. That's good feedback.
And it's a great point. I think that creatives, regardless of what the focus is, do want to do, for the most part, a good job. And if they don't, then they need to study more, get feedback, get reviews, get in critique groups, or, play their music for other people to see how it goes. Music, which is something that you're into, at least that's what you mentioned earlier, Douglas, in days gone by, songwriters and singers and groups would go to radio stations to get their music on the air and to build a following for it. I think that's kind of where self-published or indie published or small press books are today. They're trying to gain a following.
Now, what we learned the hard way originally was that when you give your books to family and friends, and you expect a review, I can guarantee you it's almost always wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. There's nothing else on the planet like it. You're terrific.
Yeah.
And that is false praise. And sometimes the harsh medicine that you need to have comes from the people who are more objective. And we try to seek that out. We have that professional edge to our thinking and the product that we want to put out. So we look for those kind of feedback.
Well, it's like your mom is always going to tell you you're handsome, even if you're 500 pounds. And I mean, it doesn't matter. She's always going to say, oh, yes, you're very handsome, because it's a reflection on her as much as it is.
So it's your baby.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you got to be. You always love your baby.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, guys, we do have to wind this down. We are quickly running out of time. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yes, please. enigmaseries.com, enigmaseries.com, for samples of all the books, some free downloads, where we're going to be and when, blog connections, and we look forward to everybody just sending us notes.
Yeah, and the Audible links as well, because we have Audible editions for all the books.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for coming on, and it was nice talking to you, and I do apologize for going off on a tangent, but I think that we brought it back nicely to books. So best of luck with your book series, and I hope everything goes well for you.
We appreciate that. We surely do, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.